Hello. Today, in the latest of the seminar series at the Social Political Sciences here at the University of York, myself, Peter Hollingsworth, a third-year student, are joined by Neal Lawson, the chair of Compass. I was wondering, Neal, in a few of your own words, you could tell us a bit about yourself.
I'm the chair of the centre-left pressure group Compass, which has been around for almost a decade now. And we started off in the Labour Party and then developed still with people in the Labour Party, but beyond that, as we go on our search for the good society, which involves the politics of equality, sustainability and democracy. And I write and think and talk about that, and I've worked in and around the Labour Party for all of my life as a kind of writer, thinker and bag carrier, and now kind of critical friend of the future of centre-left politics.
And today's talk is entitled The Politics of a Good Society. Could you give us a brief introduction to what your talk will be about today?
We're at what you might call a conjuncture, a turning point in the political and economic position of the country. And these things happen come along not very often. They did in 1945 and they did in 1979, and I think we're at another potential turning point for the future of our country in terms of its political, economic and democratic formation. And I want to talk about that, and I want to talk about why I think the Labour Party isn't ready for it. All the things that kind of made Labour strong in 45 and able to be a transformative force have now gone, disappeared. And that leaves Labour and the centre-left much weaker. And then it gets even worse, because since the decline of those things that made Labour strong, we've seen the development of two things in a way. Firstly, environmental politics, which Labour in the past, and no one thought about. And that matters in part because changes in environment, climate change, tend to affect the poor first, in terms of rising fuel prices, food prices, etc. And we're just beginning to experience that, and Labour has very little to say about that stuff, primarily because it's all about the politics of more. Essentially, the politics of Labour is to say, you've got a 32-inch screen, the Tories will give you a 36-inch TV screen and we'll give you a 42-inch screen. That's essentially what the politics is. We'll give you more of the share. And my view is that both has an environmental impact because of turbo consumerism, but it also has effect on the politics of and the culture and identity of people, because if it's just a kind of rampant turbo consumerism, that's all about individual advance, and that undermines the social solidarity necessary for Labour to do well. So that's the first new problem. The second new problem is that Labour and Labourism is essentially a vertical, hierarchical form of politics. I think we're seeing the rise of a new formation of horizontalism, of self-management, of autonomy, of voice, of self-organisation. And I don't think Labour is particularly alive to what you might call a kind of, Facebook generation of politics.
Well, talking about the electorate and society more generally, you talked before about turbo consumerism, and we'll hear about that more later. But how do you think that affects our generation, my generation, younger people and younger voters?
We all buy stuff, we all settle our identity by what we buy, and my glasses and my jumper, and you do exactly the same, and we all do that. I think the issue is how far does that go, and what extent is it the driving force of totally of our identities, of our lives, and I think we live in a kind of all-consuming world where these things have become far too important, and I think what we need to do is go back to a sense of balance, and I think that's as relevant to young people as it is to older people. But in general, I think that the challenge for the younger, your generation, is this kind of conflict, this tension between hierarchical politics and horizontal politics, because I see it quite difficult to find out where they meet, because the hierarchical is always about the kind of hard power, hard and quick, we'll impose our will on people, and the horizontal is much more about kind of soft negotiated power, about building alliances, about taking time, negotiating, deliberative, developing consensus. And they're two very different cultures and very different ways of being. And I'm not quite sure yet how those two things are going to fit together, because you need both a project which can, some kind of party which requires some hierarchy, which is going to be able to capture the state, but somehow we've got to find a way of doing it in a softer way, which is open to these other forces, whether that's Occupy, Uncut, 38 Degrees, all sorts of different movements and things that are bubbling up, because the old politics isn't delivering.
You talk about old politics and new politics. Would it be right to say that you're associating that with a generational divide there between young people and old people? To me, it wouldn't necessarily seem the majority view that a new generation embraces consensus politics. A lot of it actually seems to be quite individualist, consumerist, and only caring about themselves and perhaps a few of their friends. Is that a problem, or do you think that's just a case of education and awakening to political engagement?
The job of politics is to bring out, the best in people, and the job of kind of centre-left politics is to appeal to that cooperative, caring, communal sense of collective well-being, because we think that that's the best way that people can fulfil themselves. And that's the problem of the moment, that's the crisis of the moment, that both in moral terms and in operational terms the left hasn't got an offer. It doesn't talk about a good society, it doesn't talk about morality, it doesn't talk about love, about care, about cooperation. It's swallowed too much of the neoliberal agenda, and it isn't talking in a language and a way which both appeals to people's now much less deferential kind of attitude. They don't want to be soldier ants, working away in a hierarchy. They want their own voice and their own say, and that's absolutely right, because to me that's what socialism is. And somehow the Labour Party has got to transform itself into something which allows that kind of trusts people to be, to save themselves and create their own world together, not just to take orders. If it's just about knocking on doors and delivering leaflets so that someone else can do it for you, I think that politics is dead, and I think we need to find a better way of doing things.
And finally, after giving your talk later on, we'll open it up to a Q&A with the audience, as we always do in the seminar series. Are there any questions that you'd like to avoid, or what would be a really bad question to be asked today?
Yeah, I think it's, to me, the difficult thing is, how can nice people finish first? That's the question. How can the people that want to have a conversation, that want to open up, that want to have a dialogue, that want to understand each other's minds and trust each other and build relationships, etc., how can they win against the people that want to fix, that want to control, that want to take the shortcut, that want to bully, harass and whatever else, which often happens in, politics, not just in Westminster, but in political life. I'm not sure what the answer to that is, and if anyone asks me that question, I'll say I don't know how that is. I don't know how we get to the stage where the bully doesn't win, and we need kind of rules in politics that allow a kind of an equality of voice, a time and a capacity for for people to speak, learn and develop their arguments together over time, and not just be cogs in a wheel, because I don't want to be a cog in the wheel.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Neal Lawson. We look forward to your talk later on.